We spoke many times in the past about the various faculties that a person has, particularly about the seichel. That seichel is the capacity that we have in identifying. Huh? I didn't hear it?
No, it's good. Is this started?
Yeah, sure. In identifying real things. Like we said, we spoke mainly seichel anushi, what's called human seichel. The reason we used seichel anushi is because this is the easiest thing that we can illustrate. Human qualities, human values. We can identify human values, and we do not need any proof for them. We don't need a logical argument why a certain thing is right and a certain thing is wrong. We sense it. We have it. This is what it identifies as human beings. As a human being, we know what is right for a human being, what is wrong for a human being. This is called seichel anushi. And we said, and above that, we could say infinitely above that, but it is also definitely within our soul, is what's called seichel eliki, a godly seichel. And a godly seichel means that we identify the truth of godliness. We identify with the truth of godliness. We may not readily understand what it is that we seek, but we readily identify with it. We spoke several sessions on where is it that we can actually see that the world is not entirely worldly, that there are godly qualities in the world itself. Like, for instance, we spoke many times that it says in the Torah, Hashem created light and darkness. Light and dark are the effect of a physical effect. Light is because there's a sun, physical sun, there's light, and dark when the sun goes away. These are completely physical, worldly entities. But then when you say day and night, these are really concepts that are defined by God Himself. And it says in the Torah that God created day and night, not just light and dark. We spoke about it to some degree to some detail. Mitzvah Shem, as time goes on, we'll touch on various things more deeply. Today, I want to identify a different dimension, which I felt quite important. And that is that in all our pursuits, we kind of feel that the burden of accomplishment is entirely within our own activity. Okay, this is like a nutshell. What I mean is the following. If I work very hard, I'm saying from our perspective, if I work very hard and I learn a lot of things and I know a lot of things and I will act according to what I've learned, then I will have been doing the right thing and I will be a good person and I will be successful. Just very simply put. Which means, in effect, that the burden of success is entirely in our own activity. What I do, this is what I have. Beyond that I don't have. In truth, this is really, as we described many times, this is a worldly perspective. Because in the world, as a matter of fact, one goes out into the world. If he works an hour, he gets paid for the hour. If he works 2 hours, he gets paid for 2 hours. Or whatever, if he produces a certain amount, he gets paid for what he produces. It's exactly commensurate to his activity. But we know, and this is a principle in Yiddishkeit, that the world was not created by human beings, by worldly activity. The world was created by God himself. He initiated the whole thing. And just as he initiated the whole thing of the world coming into being, he initiates the life of every individual person. This is illustrated in a very commonly known expression, actually from the Gemara, and this became one of the 12 psukim that the Rebbe urged that the children should all know, where we say, Yogaito umotsoso ta'ami. What does that mean? If you labor, and umotsoso, and you found, then that you should believe him. Somebody said, Yogaiti, I labored hard, I worked hard, umotsosi, and I found, then ta'ami, you can believe him that he's probably telling the truth. What is the depth, what is the inner meaning of this expression, Yogaiti umotsosi ta'ami? Of course, when a person works hard, the harder he works, the more he knows, the more he accomplishes. But there is a deeper insight in this. And the insight is that we don't say, Yogaiti v'yodaiti, I've worked hard and I know. Or Yogaiti, I worked hard and I accomplished. We say Yogaiti umotsosi. The word motsosi means I found. What does finding mean? Finding is an allusion to finding, like somebody finds an article, finding unexpectedly. You find it. Finding unexpectedly means that even though that nothing that I did created this acquisition, this article, but somehow I found it. Like somebody walks in the street and he finds an article. Walking the street does not make him find the article. It's unrelated. He just happened to have found it. And therefore, and so this expression, Yogaiti umotsosi, is denoting something much greater than just I worked hard and I know. There is some other quality to this. A quality that's called motsosi, I found, which means I get something for nothing, so to speak. I get something that comes from elsewhere. Not just by virtue of what I worked for. I want to discuss this so we can relate to this concept, because we all know that we have to work very hard, and there is no substitute for working hard. What is this mitzia? What does it mean, motzosi? How do I find? And I started saying before that we have to remember that the initiator of the whole existence is God Himself. Bereshis bara Elokim, the very beginning is God created, God initiated the whole creation. And God initiates the presence and existence of every individual person. What does this mean, that God initiated the world? God initiates every person. It means that every individual person and everything in the world, even though to us it may appear very vulnerable, sometimes insignificant, but really everything has a godly quality to it. What does a godly quality mean? A quality of infinite value. Not a value that is measured by what I can use it for, but infinite value, a godly value. I may have a chance to go back to this a little later. This godly quality is inherent in everything in the world. The very existence of the world itself represents a godly force. To us, it's a physical item, and it has its value. What we see is a physical item that says very little and represents very little significance and value. But in fact, it has a godly spark in it, and it has infinite value. But we don't see it. There's a famous story that we know from the Alter Rebbe, that the Alter Rebbe said at the end of his physical life, he said, he pointed to a beam in the ceiling, and he said, I don't see the beam, I see the koyach halaki, the godliness that creates the beam. Which is a totally different view. So we are not talking about us reaching that madrega, but what we are talking about is to know that everything has infinite quality, infinite value, because God creates everything. Since in everything there is a godly quality, why do we have to labor so much? Shouldn't it be straight and obvious? Why is it that we have to work so hard? The Gemara, as a matter of fact, says, like this. Did you ever see, the Gemara says, an animal having to work hard for its food? They have to work hard. It kind of comes their way. And here we, human beings, who is the choice, the chosen of all creations, the highest, and we have to work hard. We have to labor. We have to till the land, even under normal circumstances. Till the land and plant and harvest. It's a whole operation. They have it on the ready. So why, in fact, is there such a thing as the requirement of labor? Essentially, the labor that we are involved in, it appears to us that as we are laboring, we're trying to understand, let's say, a piece of Gemara, to understand the piece of Chumash, whatever it is, we are working hard to try to understand it. We're actually creating, so to speak, the logic, the seichel in it. That is not what is really taking place. Because the seichel, the koyach ha-seichel, we already have in the nefesh. And as the Alter Rebbe says, we all learn Tanya, that the seichel in the nefesh understands and knows everything. The nefesh knows and understands everything. No mystery, nothing. It understands the lakus itself. Why do we have to work hard? The working hard is for the purpose that we should be able to understand it even while the nefesh is in the guf. In other words, we should be able to understand it from a physical perspective. Not just from a spiritual perspective, but in the physical world. What is the process? What does this mean? Essentially, the process is, this is similar to if there is sunlight outside and your window is frosted, the light doesn't come through, and you have to come and wash the window, and then the sunlight comes through. So when the sunlight comes through the window, you don't say that you washing the window made the sunlight, because the sunlight was there all the time. What you did was allow the sunlight to come through. The similar process is when it comes to understanding and learning and to understanding the lakus in the world. It isn't that we have to figure it out, we have to formulate it, we have to create it. What we have to do is open up, break through the barrier, the physical barrier that does not allow us to recognize it. Does not allow the light of the neshama to come through in our brain. But once we clean it out, when we open the window, we clear out the window, then what we get is something that we never expected. When you clear the window, and all of a sudden we have a powerful ray of sunlight. This is something much more than we worked for. This is the meaning of these words. Yogaiti umotzos. That when we work very hard, and the working hard is to eliminate from our minds all those things, all obstacles, all those things that prevent us from understanding Torah. But when we break through and we clear our mind and we get a window into our seichel, then all of a sudden we have a brightness, a mitzvah, like you found something that you never expected, you never aimed for it. You never expected it to happen. Like a mitzvah, like one finding something totally unexpectedly. This is the real process that happens in the process of learning, both learning and developing one's midas and so forth. everyone, I'm sure, at some point in time, experienced the following phenomenon. You're learning something and you find it difficult to understand. And then you do some work, you labor, you ask somebody. And after hard work, then suddenly there's a spark, there's an opening. And you say, that's what it means. Now I understand. What happened over there? What does it mean, now I understand? The logical arguments were there all the time. What was missing before? And now you all of a sudden understand. And when you understand, you recognize that the clarity with which you understand is infinitely more than all the words that were used to explain it. The words that were used to explain it are only means to bypass certain cracks, certain obstacles in your understanding. But what you really understand is so bright and so clear that now I don't understand how come I had difficulty till now to understand. What was the problem? It's so obvious and clear. What actually took place? What actually happened was that in the nefesh, you always understood it. But in your conscious mind, you couldn't relate to it. You couldn't reach it. Because your mind was too physically oriented. And when you break through, you attach, you recognize that which you always understood. Now you understand it consciously. That which you always related to, now you can relate to it consciously. You know, in other words, you get to know what you always knew, so to speak. This is the principle that we said in the onset, that we have to remember that the initiator, the starting point of our own lives is from Hashem. We didn't start it. We don't come from a position of darkness. We have a neshama, and we have a creator. And our job is to break through the obstacles that we face and find the light and allow the light to come through. To come back to the inyan of our labor and our avodah. What is the labor about? We say that we clear our minds. In a person's life pursuits, everyone recognizes that life does not flow automatically. There are obstacles to success. The reason for the obstacle to success in a nutshell is that, in fact, the whole purpose of us being here is to break through these obstacles, just very briefly. It doesn't flow automatically and naturally. But as we're breaking through, our greatest accomplishment is the recognition that the truth to which we have gotten, whether it is an all-encompassing, a very general point, or a very simple point, the greatest accomplishment is that when you recognize that the truth to which we have gotten is not a truth that is merely arguable logically, that can be proven logically, but that it is a truth, what's called an inherent truth. It is true because that's how Hashem created the world. That's how it has to be. I'll explain this in a minute. Let us examine success in the worldly sense. You say a person went into business and he was successful. What is success? How do you define success in the world, in a worldly sense? If a person works and he gets paid for his work, so this is entirely in balance with his input. He puts in an hour and gets back an hour. This we do not call success. This is not called hatzlacha. This is like he's getting paid for his work. In the worldly sense, success means that he sort of gets more than he put in. Like a businessman, he invested some money, and this investment itself grew many times over. So his investment, his work was to a certain, it was limited, and he got much more out of it, way beyond the effort and the investment. Let's go a step further. In the world, in the worldly definitions, there is a person. There's one who can carry his financial responsibility. He can pay his bills, and then there is a stage where we say he is wealthy. What does wealth mean? Wealth means that he has much more than he needs. But actually, wealth does not only mean that he has more than he needs. Wealth means that he has beyond the normal measure of what is measurable. Like there is an expression that if you want to buy, one saw that someone went in to buy look at boats, at yachts. So he came over to a yacht and he asked, "How much is this one?" So the man says to him, "Sir, if you have to inquire how much it is, it's not for you." What does that mean? That this is wealth, so to speak, in the worldly sense, unlimited. It's not, of course, everything is limited, but in terms of what a person can spend, it's unlimited. What's the significance of this? In human mentality, In human mentality, clearly a person will never spend all that money. But there's a mentality involved. In human mentality, when a person reaches this, so to speak, unlimited wealth, it isn't when he can spend, how much he can use. A person can never consume all of that. The point is that he has no limit in terms of satisfying what he wants. There's no limit. No limit is more than saying I can get what I want. I can get what I want means that you can manage to get what you want. No limit means I don't even have to think in terms of can I get it. Whatever I want I can get. It is there for me for wanting. I don't have to create, I don't have to make any effort to get it. This means real limitlessness. As one learns, and we labor through the learning, and we understand one Mishnah, and we understand another Mishnah, and we understand another concept in Hasidus, it appears to us that what we accomplish is, okay, so I know another Mishnah, I know this line of Tanya, and I understand this, I understand this. And the cumulative total of what I know is so and so. But this is not what is actually taking place. What actually happens is that every time that we understand the Mishnah and truly understand it, every time that we understand the word of Chassidus, there is that opening to this wealth, which is what's called unlimited wealth of the Seichel HaNefesh. It's not measurable by the quantity of what we know. It opens up an insight. It opens up a recognition of a presence, of a truth that is completely beyond the limited world. What it actually gets us to recognize is not just I know this, the answer to this question or the answer to the question. What we get to recognize is not the answer, but that there is a source for these answers. That all of these problems, all the answers has a source in the infinite truth. And this recognition is this umotzosa. This gives a person infinite wealth. This is what opens a person's mind. This is what brings life into his seichel, into this in this little human being. This is what I said before in brief, that as I want to give one more illustration, then I'll come back to this. The illustration will be from an engineering perspective, but we're not strangers to engineering. Everybody has seen houses, buildings, whatever it is. Every engineering project starts off with a pen and pencil, with a pencil and paper. Right? You start figuring out, first of all, you design the building, this is what I want. This is the size. This is the height. This is the number of rooms. And then you figure out how much various materials is needed, and how much labor, and how it's going to be put together. And everything is figured up on a paper to the very last brick. To the very last brick. And then you go you start working on it. You get all the labor, you get all the materials, and put everything together. And you see this house coming from scratch, from the foundation on, and you see it grow. You know where every brick is. And where every screw was put in. You know exactly how it was put together. And you know exactly not only how it was together, but why this brick was put this way, because every house, in addition to the design of the house, also has to be what's called put on the plot. In other words, a piece of land, where it's put. If the land is even, or the land is straight, or the land is what kind of texture in the land, if it's a rock, if it's hard land, or if it is soft land, everything has to do with the location where it's put. So he knows everything exactly why and where everything is done. And the house comes up, and now it's finished. House is finished. So the engineer, you would think the engineer, to him this house is no wonder, because he figured out ahead of time exactly how it's supposed to be built, and the reason for everything that's being done. And yet, we know that after it's all finished, he stands there and he bewonders his own handicraft. Just, wow, how does this really all stand? In other words, the reality of it, even though he figured it all out, and yet the reality of it baffles him himself. Why is it? What is it that he sees in it now that baffles him and kind of wows him, where he knows that this house is not a house. The house is so many bricks and so many pieces of wood and so many screws and so many nuts and so many nails. It's not just one entity. It happens when the house is actually standing and it's a finished product, ready for human use. He recognizes just in this simple house a certain quality that is really beyond all that was put into it. In mathematics, I have a mathematician here. In mathematics, there is a rule that the whole is the sum of its parts. Correct? The whole is the sum of its parts. But here we have that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. There is something in the whole that is not contained in the sum of the parts. What is this something? This something is the truth of the significance of this house. There is a posik. We all are familiar with this posik, but I want to kind of emphasize its significance. The posik the Melech said about the Beis Hamikdash, but it's true about every human endeavor. It says, "Im Hashem lo yivne ba'is, shov omlu beinov bei." If Hashem would not be involved in building a house, then all the effort of the builders is to no avail. What is that? What does that mean? We have to bring it back to our... we have to understand like this, that all the engineer did was put the house together, but the significance of the house and what the actual soul, so to speak, of the house is not the creation of the engineer. That is the creation of the human soul. That is really a godly creation itself. And therefore he himself is affected, is mispoiled from what he sees, because it is greater than what he has actually created, what he has actually worked on. Coming back to ourselves, it is imperative, meaning it is very important, that as we are working, and each one is doing their thing, whether it is in yeshiva or in Mitzvah Shem outside of the yeshiva, we have to always recognize that the work is very important. But this work has an inherent soul to it, has an neshama to it. We have to recognize, for instance, I do a mitzvah, I put on tefillin. So I put on tefillin, I'm doing the right thing. I'm fulfilling my Jewish obligation that I have to put on tefillin. I'm being a good boy. And I did my duty, and therefore I deserve reward. But that's not what happened. The most important principle the most important occurrence in this that I put on tefillin is that I'm here fulfilling Hashem's will. Not that I'm doing the right thing. In other words, it's not just the duty that I did, but Hashem's presence is here, and I'm here doing Hashem's will. Hashem's presence has to always be taken into account, because this is the source of success. It is not just the action that we do, but it is the greater significance that this action has a spirit behind it, has a soul behind it. The same thing, as we said before, when we labor over a piece of Gemara, we labor over a piece of Chassidus, we try to understand. And it seems to us that it is our seichel, that in our brain, that has to understand. It isn't our brain that has to understand. We have to clear our mind and break through all the obstacles in our mind, and then the spark of light comes in. Because the true understanding, source of understanding, is not in our brain, but it is in the soul that's in our brain. The true creation of the engineer is not that he made walls stand, but it is that he built a house that's useful, that has a human quality to it, and that he didn't build, so to speak, with his hands. That he built in automatically. That came automatically almost, because that's there because of the human spirit that exists. So, to conclude and to summarize the point, Sometimes it will appear to us, sometimes our learning or doing mitzvahs or this, in general our lives seem to be devoid of life. They seem to be just duty. I have to do this and I have to do that. This is a misunderstanding of what's going on. We have to always be able to turn to the Creator. Always be able to say Kapitel Tili. Always be able to turn to the real source of all life. It isn't just duty. On the other hand, when we are involved in duty, we have to know that the real source of success in this duty and what is going to be the breakthrough, what all we do is, as we said, is eliminate the obstacle. If I don't understand, this is what it says, that it says in the Zohar, Kushya misitro de klipa, that all kashas. Kashas means that we have contradictions, seeming contradiction in Torah. The contradictions come from klipa. Why klipa? Because the reason the contradictions is because we don't see the real light of Torah. Something is covering the real light. And that's why we have it's seeming a contradiction. And therefore the elimination, breaking through this contradiction, means breaking through and bringing out the light of Torah a little more. So the point, so to speak, in terms of our personal benefit from this recognition is twofold. One is that this will prevent, this will help us along, that even when we are involved in a very difficult battle with ourselves, we will know that the battle really is won before we even start it. Because the highest is there, the truth is there even before we start it. And if we have a battle, it's because it is that we have to, like you say, dig a little deeper and remove the obstacle. And on the other hand, the end result of this battle is not just, okay, so I'll know this piece of Gemara. The end result of this is altogether immeasurable. Altogether immeasurable. It is another insight, another bit of light coming straight from the soul, from the seichel of nefesh. Which is the whole source and the whole spirit of growth, of human growth. When a person's mind opens up and he sees value and he sees spirit in his life, rather than being bound by physical limitations. The whole inyan of Torah mitzvahs is not just put a duty on us, like we should do the right thing and not do the wrong thing. It is to elevate us, drag us out from Mitzrayim, elevate us from having a limited view of existence, of a physical view of existence, to recognizing that there is a truth to existence, to life. And when we recognize that, there is the expression that, Yogaiti umotzosi. After you went through all the labor, but then you come to Umotzosi and you found, when you find it, then you know that it was all worth it. Every bit of input, every bit of effort paid off many times over. Because what you find is a totally different human being. Not the one you started with. Okay, Rebbe should help him. Everybody should have Hatzlacha and should be a guide to Motzasi.